Good morning, everyone. We seem to have quite a busy meeting this morning. I was just looking at the numbers who are logged on. It looks fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our second iKEN live event, Innovating in a Crisis, How Our Response to COVID-19 Will Shape Our Future. My name is Susan Aiken. I'm the leader of Glasgow City Council. For those of you who are European colleagues, that's roughly the equivalent of the Mayor of the City of Glasgow. And I'm delighted to have been asked to chair this morning's event, but I'm not going to take up too much time because it's really our speakers and the discussion amongst yourselves that we are particularly keen to hear from today. And so over the course of the next hour, we'll explore how cities are implementing innovative solutions, harnessing new technologies and embracing new working cultures in order to tackle COVID-19 and to mitigate its human and economic impact. We'll also explore how innovations happening now could have a long-lasting impact, helping us to repair, rebuild and redesign a hopeful post-lockdown future for our cities, communities and people. So we've got two speakers to hear from, hailing from two of Europe's most innovative cities, Aarhus and Bologna. Today's event has been delivered through collaboration with our European Capital of Innovation Alumni iKEN network. The iKEN network and platform is powered by Glasgow City Council and Glasgow City of Science and Innovation, who curate new opportunities for greater collaborative innovation between academic, public and business sectors locally, nationally and across Europe, including today's event, to drive greater business innovation and support inclusive growth aims, helping to make our economy work for everyone. Our iKEN platform connects 21 of Europe's leading cities of innovation to researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, policymakers and investors worldwide to develop fresh ideas, share best practice and unlock the power of co-creation to transform innovation policy and practice around the world. Glasgow prides herself on being a city of innovation, and we are delighted to host iKEN and to power iKEN, but we certainly don't think that we know everything. So communicating with other innovation cities and sharing that best practice is absolutely essential for us as a city to keep moving forward and to keep achieving, using innovation to achieve the outcomes that we want for our communities and our citizens. It was originally conceived as a platform for cities who've previously taken part in the European Commission's annual iCapital competition to share their knowledge and best practice. The site is open to all and it provides a unique opportunity to network with experts across Europe, hear about the latest in innovation and to share best practice. Regular live chats happen on the platform, centering on various innovation themes. Some recent examples include a discussion on drone technology, the future of transport and much more. We'd love if you would all become part of iKEN and get involved in forthcoming chats, including a follow-up discussion taking forward key themes from this event. So please do sign up to the platform, and I think there have been details posted in the chat already. And just to tell you a little bit about the iCapital competition, the European Commission annually runs the European Capital of Innovation Awards to recognise the efforts by European and Horizon 2020 associated countries' cities in stimulating innovation within their citizens and social structures. These prizes are one of the main tools to support the European Union's efforts to reward best practice and initiative aimed at building, enhancing and promoting vibrant innovation ecosystems that positively transform lifestyles and living conditions in urban communities. The submission for this year's contest closed yesterday, I understand, so we're excited to find out who will be successful for this year. Today's event is also an official feeder event of VentureFest, which pulls together a programme of activities that encourage and support a culture of innovation in business throughout Scotland. You can find out about other relevant events and get involved in wider VentureFest events via venturefest.scot, where you can also sign up to their newsletter and follow them on Twitter at VentureFestScot. Some logistics for today. We'd love our attendees to engage with the discussion. First, we'll have talks from our panel, followed by a chance to ask questions and discuss the topic more widely. You'll see in the chat section on Zoom, I think everyone is now an expert on Zoom these days, even if we were 14 weeks ago, we are now. But just in case, you'll see in the chat function on the right that you can type questions, or at the bottom, there's a button to raise your hand. So if you'd like to contribute to the discussion, please indicate this by raising your hand and we'll come to you during the Q&A. Otherwise, please feel free to type your questions into the chat box and throughout the discussion, and I'll field the questions to the speakers at the end. Please note also we're recording the session today and it will be made available on the iKEN platform for colleagues and partners who weren't able to join us today. So with that, I'll go straight on to introducing our first speaker. We're delighted to have join us Stefania Paolozzi, the project and community manager at, now give me a second on this, Fondazione Innovazione Urbana in Bologna. My apologies, I'm not an Italian speaker, as you can tell. Since she's been doing that job, Stefania's been doing that job since 2017. In particular, she works on public policies and community engagement strategies within the Civic Imagination Office of the Foundation. She has a background in cohesion policy studies and she holds a postgraduate master's in smart communities design and management. Prior to joining the Foundation, she worked for national and international local authorities networks in Italy and Brussels. Since 2019, she's the Vice President of RENA, a non-profit association of volunteer activists whose goal is to connect and boost communities of innovators across Italy and foster public debate on active citizenship and the promotion of good governance. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Stefania Paolozzi, and we're delighted to have you, Stefania.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I now share my screen so everybody can see the presentation. Here I go, just give me, okay. I hope everybody can see the presentation. Just say me if it's okay, Susan. Okay, perfect. So today I am Stefania Paolozzi. I am a project manager for the Foundation for Urban Innovation in Bologna that was founded by the municipality and the University of Bologna. And today I will illustrate to you some of the actions that the city of Bologna is implementing after the coronavirus emergency explosion. Before starting, I will give you just some information about the context of civic imagination policies in Bologna. Since 2014, the municipality decided to implement a new model of a smart city that is mainly based on the enhancement and promotion of the collective intelligence of the city. So as you can see from this first slide, you can see that many were the tools and initiatives that were implemented by the municipality to create a collaborative ecosystem. So just to give some administrative innovation, but also policy innovation to enhance this collaboration in the city. In particular, we are, by using ad hoc tools and method, we are experimenting this approach that we used to call proximity approach. That means, and that refers not only to the scale and the physical scale at which civic imagination policies are implemented, but it refers also to the willingness to place social and human capital at the center of public choices. And so we identify proximity as the way to formulate inclusive and just policies, and just to start processes of just transition toward a more inclusive and sustainable city. When COVID emergency started, we were very as everybody, I suppose we were very confused by how fast and how extraordinary was the change that we were experiencing in our societies. And we identified the three biggest elements that will affect our action. In particular, there was this lockdown and physical distancing that for sure we were experiencing that could have introduces this big risk of transversal inefficiencies in the urban policies and action that we were promoting and implementing. Especially, it was very difficult for us to experience this lockdown because we used to go in the neighborhoods of the city to announce participation and have relationship with people around the neighborhood, but these were immediately the first thing that we had to stop. So there was a very big change in our actions. But at the same time, this lockdown and physical distancing introduced some new perspective for a proximity approach, because as you may probably heard from Paris and Amsterdam, Berlin, everybody's experimenting these new proximity policies in which people can go and live in small neighborhoods and live in very small areas of the city. At the same time, another element that we analyzed is the redefinition of urban governance balances. There was a very big move toward centralization, both at the institutional level. So decision started to be taken at the highest level of the institution, and at the same time there was this centralization toward the national level that is in Italy is taking a lot of decisions, and not always with very clear and easy coordination with other territorial levels. And there was also a risk of very big bureaucratization given the limitation of the COVID emergency. But at the same time, the city showed a very big demand for participation and activism and self-organization, asking for implementing mutualistic activities to respond and to answer together with the municipality to the biggest social and economical effects of the crisis. And we also identified this increasement of the political awareness of cities, and also the attempt and the willingness of cities to find and redefine competences to have the possibility to implement more actions. As a third element, we find this big uncertainty that is characterizing this time has introduced the risk to a very big technicalization or paralysis of policy actions. But at the same time, it represents an opportunity for collective intelligence, and it opens new spaces for experimentation. So on the basis of these reasonings, we decided to give our contribution to the city and to work together with the city through a coronavirus emergency observatory. It is not just documentation or analysis observatory, but it introduced also a dimension of experimentations that open up some space to experiment processes and to prototype and design intervention with the scope with the willingness to use this prototype for as a vehicle for biggest innovation in the future months. In particular, what happened in Bologna in these days, I just resume some of the initiatives that were born inside this observatory. The first one is an experimentation on ethical deliveries. So as you may have experienced after the lockdown, the demand for deliveries and for logistic management was, there was a very big increasement in this demand for deliveries. So we decided to take the input of some rider unions in order to imagine and to try to design a public service for deliveries, together with the proximity commercials and together with rider unions and other association of the city, in order to overcome the model of platform capitalism and prototype collective and solidarity-based deliveries based on the principle of decent work. Another experimentation that we are implementing is referred to children and families. I don't know if you know that in Italy, children are not going to school since February. So there is a very big problem in the managing of education and the increasement of the risk of educational poverty, but also the management of families and the possibility to go to work and at the same time have care of your families. So we decided to involve communities to redesign municipal summer camps in order to try to understand how school, public sector, but also association in the neighborhood can collaborate to rethink a way to implement education processes in the city. And last but not least, in response to the great activism and the demand of activation of a lot of networks in the city, we implement a lot of interviews with association and activists in the city in order to understand the new trends and the evolution of the possible evolution of public community partnership in order to offer social and cultural services in the neighborhoods. One of the example of this, of the output of this research and experimentation activities is the small neighborhood theaters initiatives that in summer will finance small theaters in the small theaters is just to say small activities, cultural and educational activities all around the city, and that were implemented thanks to the collaboration and thanks to crowdfunding promoted by a big association here in Bologna. So I just go quickly to the conclusion. What are we learning? We are learning that flexible project management, but also multi-sectoral teams are now fundamental assets to enhance public resilience. We are understanding that all this action that we are promoting maybe do not have a very impacting or immediately or can immediately be implemented and have a big output, but at the same time, implementing this kind of action is kind of promoting advocacy initiatives toward the municipality, but also toward the city. So this is of paramount importance because we are understanding that, especially now, alliances are really strategic to implement initiatives to tackle the challenges that the city is experimenting. We are understanding that digital tools are essential, as everybody knows, but at the same time, we are also understanding that we cannot use digital tools to substitute entirely physical participation, or just to say, okay, I go on with the physical participation, with the physical engagement, but just move to the digital tools. We have to change the model. We have to imagine new forms of engagement because digital tools are not able to substitute the physical participation. Another thing that we are reasoning on, and this is very important for us, is that this idea of proximity must enhance civic, private, and public action and partnership to overcome the crisis, because all alone the municipality cannot answer the many needs that are emerging in the city. And last but not least, but probably the most important thing, what we are understanding is that proximity will have a future just if is the approach through which public action take charge of the most vulnerable people in the city. And so the needs that many times are not taken into consideration by national legislation, national answer. So the proximity needs to analyze and understand which are the people and which are the communities that have needs that are not taken in charge by other territorial levels. So this is more or less what I wanted to share with you, and then I hope that you have other questions to go on and analyzing all these intuition and lessons that we are learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefania. That was fascinating. I think a really great example of showing how perhaps this COVID crisis that we've been through has really brought focus to understanding what the purpose of innovation is for, in many ways, that we don't innovate for the sake of it, but to deliver outcomes for our people. And the vulnerabilities that this crisis has exposed has given us, I think, some real clarity around what that purpose of innovating is. So that was fascinating. Our next speaker is Anne Vest, who's the head of department for the ITK Lab and Centre for Innovation in Aarhus in Denmark. Since 2015, Anne has been the head of CFIA and ITK Lab, which is an innovation unit and lab working across the municipality to support and build innovation capacity. Using new tech, open data and design thinking in their approach, they've been finding new ways of innovating public welfare and city development. Anne is an experienced and trained digital innovation leader, project manager and certified facilitator with years of experience in leading digital innovation projects and programmes from both private and public organisations. So Anne will explain firstly what Aarhus have done in terms of innovation as a result of COVID-19, and also what they're planning to do now to bring some of the experience and new innovations into the future in terms of evaluation and learnings from COVID-19. So without further ado, thank you, and I'll hand over to Anne.
Thank you, Susan, and hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me here to share experiences of the last couple of months in Aarhus. I think I don't need to introduce myself. You did it so well, Susan. So I just jump right into the presentation. So if Helen, you will share my slides. Yes, of course, in Aarhus, the corona crisis and the lockdown period have significantly changed the condition for the way we work, both in the administration, but also in the departments and for managers and for employees close to citizens and also for the citizens. The corona crisis all of a sudden created a reality that has forced us to innovate and digitize, but also to change and implement in really record time. So no doubt that the crisis has really putting us under a heavy pressure in our organization, but from an innovation point of view, there's also this plus side of it all, because we really have increased innovation activity on many levels in part of the organization, both in specific services in relation to the citizens and new ways of delivering services, and also the more invisible innovations such as ways we collaborate, make decisions across the organizations and so forth. So I'll try just to sum up a bit of what we have been doing in Aarhus recently. And if we look at the timeframes in the corona crisis, from an innovative perspective. Then we started out with a stage where with the emergent crisis, the top managers were then trying to take control of the situation and make really top-down decision from day to day, preparing of what was going to happen. And in Denmark, we were sent home with a very short, and it was like in 2 days, and then we were sitting home from our remote offices trying to make things work. So of course this period, the Corona crisis after lockdown, we were a lot of employees, staff managers that was trying to find new ways to solve tasks locally and digitally through a lot of experiments. And this crisis, as days went by and weeks went by and months, then it was suddenly the new normal to experiment our way through this crisis. And we tried a lot of local new ways. And of course, the digital transformation has been a very huge transformation for us. So right now we are in the middle of a reopening again, and we need now to return to a normal or more normal everyday life, but it's or everyday work life, but it is not the old normal that we are heading. It is actually a whole new reality we are facing. So what was the new normal during lockdown is another time we are heading now. And the interesting question for us right now is, of course, of all the experiments and new things that we have tried during the crisis, what will we bring with us into the future, and what will we not bring with us? You may shift, Helen. Go to the next slide. First of all, we have made a huge change in the digital work habits, transformations in terms of digital transformation in the corporations. We have really set turbo on the use of digital tools all over. In healthcare, for example, visits to the homes with newborns have been significantly replaced by virtual meetings with success. It has always also been possible for the job center to stay in contact with almost all unemployed people virtually. And our citizen services has also been able to use the virtual solutions to a very large extent. We also have managed really to connect the organization through digital communication in ways that and in scale that we haven't thought even were possible before the crisis. We have had the breakthrough of virtual meetings, both internally but also with the citizens in a lot of kinds of levels. And in the schools, we have the breakthrough of virtual teaching. A lot of digital learning tools were implemented. And it has been really interesting to observe that a number of pupils with poor well-being in the classroom, in the physical classrooms, they have received a significantly greater benefit of the online teaching. And I think there's similar experiences around some vulnerable citizens that really can have greater benefit from have the contact in a virtual online way with the municipality. It could be interesting to hear a little about your experiences around the other cities if you have made similar experience. And of course, we have also have huge breakthrough in virtual meetings all over, but also with the citizens in terms of citizen engagement, where we have had some virtual events where we have had the experience that there are a number of participants versus the traditional physical meetings. They increase the number of participants, and it's also very interesting from an innovation point of view. The both points here, they are just random examples, as so many new things has been going on. We are just about to arrange a more systematic evaluation and mapping of all the initiatives across the organization. So I don't have the mapping right now. I don't have the overview right now, and I don't think that anybody have it in our organization. So this is just some examples here. Yeah, please shift, Helen. So yes, we are now in the middle of this reopening, getting back to a more normal work life. And of all the changes that we have made during the crisis, we now have to ask ourselves what is relevant for the future. Because it's not all of the experiments and the local innovations and the new initiatives, all the changes that we have to bring into the future. We have to ask ourselves, what is really relevant for the future, and how can we make impact? What is it for challenges in the future that is still there, though we have had a corona crisis? So that's what we are going to do now. And we have had our political level in our local government. They have asked the organization to try really to map and evaluate and learn from the crisis, so that we could bring some of this learning and experience into the future. And they have, of course, focus on not all of it, but what is strategic and political interesting to take a look at and to evaluate on. So that is what we are going to do in Aarhus right now. And if you go to the last slide, Helen, yeah. So there's a lot of questions to ask ourselves right now. And I think for us in Aarhus, we are, because there's been a lot of change going on and a lot of innovation going on, and a lot of crisis management going on in the organization. A lot of employees feel exhausted right now. And they are, it's summertime, it's a holiday season time right now in a few weeks. So I think really that people just are getting tired and need holiday. But I think there are also at least 3 different perspectives that we have to balance in the organization. Those who want to return to how things were, to the old normal, and those who want to keep some of the things they have done during the crisis, and also those who see it as a window of opportunity to change everything right now. Our director, our municipal director, said it like this some days ago: changes can come much faster than we can imagine, but maybe we can also make changes much faster than we can ever imagine. So I think that's a very positive side of the crisis that is very good in an innovation perspective, really. Yeah, that was all for me for now.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was equally fascinating, and I think the question that you've left us there at the end with about what we keep and what we don't keep, and where we go from here is a really great opener for our discussion. We've got about 20 minutes or so for discussion, and just we actually our first question leads on extremely well from that your final point there. Which is perhaps some of these new changes that many would want to rush to embrace aren't going to suit everyone. So we've got a question from Jitendra Patel, who says, points out it has to be said that virtual learning doesn't suit all pupils or learning styles, and that can be extrapolated to other sectors, in that some people won't be able to shop online or just would prefer not to shop online, for example. So how do we identify and measure and mitigate the challenge of getting that balance? And can we? Is it possible? That's my addition, I suppose. Or how much is it possible, other than through the experimentation, I suppose, that Anne referred to in her presentation as well. I'll maybe go to Stefania first on that one.
Yeah, thank you. I think that I agree with the idea that not everybody is okay with all this virtual life, and that especially in the virtual learning we have seen in Italy a very big problem, also because of some problem in the virtual development of the nation. But at the same time there were lots of people and a lot of children that couldn't access to education for months, actually. Especially children of second generation of migrant people, really they couldn't go to school for 3 months. So I think that the idea of mixing digital tools and small physical encounters maybe can be a good option, and that we have to start planning with this 2 dimension, and to understand that we have to have variable geometries. We cannot think that a solution fits for all, and that if we decide to go virtual, everything has to be virtual. So the idea is that we have to start thinking at the cities and at the policies with more a perspective with in which times are thought differently, tools are mixed. So that the challenge here, I think, is to really try to make the best of all the innovation that we have done and the experimentation that we have done, and try to compose a new ecosystem for policies, because this is what is needed. We have to, when we talk about proximity, this is exactly the idea, to try to understand who is left behind. How can we respond to more needs without saying that a solution fits for all? So I think that this is the challenge, and if we want to talk about the shop part of the question, here I think that looking at the city in small areas and try to understand which are the small commercial, small shops that can help also elderly people to have services guaranteed. This is very important, and the idea of this ethical deliveries platform is also based on this idea that we have to map physically the city and then use the virtual part just to enable the innovation of the way of the lifestyle.
I think that's there's a lot of that. I think chimes very much with our experience in Glasgow and how we're going to have to respond to the very different needs of our communities. And I think your final suggestion there, that we perhaps need to think in a much more local way and hyper-local way about delivering services, particularly commercial services like retail, for example. Would, I think it will strike a chord with many cities, particularly those which in the past, like Glasgow, have put a lot of resource and effort into a big central retail offering, which now is perhaps, well, not just perhaps, I think almost certainly not the way forward. Just a reminder to everyone, if you've got a question, please do put your hand up and I'll look out for it, or post your question in the chat. I'm going to go to Anne, and if I can maybe ask you a question, please do pick up on any of the points from the previous question. But if I could ask you as well, I was struck by when you were talking about that we have experimented our way through the crisis to a certain extent, and we have done some things that are completely new. But where do you think the balance is in, I suppose, turning it on its head? Not new things, but actually accelerating things that we would have wanted to do anyway, or we were planning to do anyway, but the crisis has given us impetus and motivation to do them faster. Where do you think the balance is in that, in terms of stuff we've done anyway, we would want to do, or new things, innovation that is real innovation that has emerged directly from this crisis?
I think that what we have seen is that in Aarhus we had the infrastructure already for the digital transformation, so it was quite easy, or not. It's not, maybe not the right word, but when we were sent home to work remotely, so it was more a matter of scaling up the capacity and to implement tools we already have, but we haven't implemented them at that time where we were sent home. So I think all the digital tools and all the digital transformation strategy that we have tried to implement the last maybe 6-8 years, suddenly we did it in 2 days. and it, of course, because we had the tools and the infrastructure. So yeah, so it was more about scaling up and implement it. And when I say that, it's in terms of using Microsoft Teams and using all the digital learning platforms that they have tried also to use in the education area, in the schools. But I know also in the social welfare area, where they have really tried also to push the digital transformation the last 5 years, in terms of getting the servants to connect and implement the digital tools to make more online services for the citizens. There have been a lot of barriers and a lot of habits that they didn't think it worked. They didn't think that that was a good way to have the connection with or to relate with the citizens. But suddenly it could happen also, and they just jumped into it and tried it out. So I think, yeah, in that sense, the crisis has done some good for some areas, because it was things that we wanted to do anyway. We just did it because it was a necessity.
Yeah. I think that's a very good way of summing it up. It leads us very well into our next question, actually, from Glenn Corrigan, who's asking what percentage of your two cities, Bologna and Aarhus, are connected digitally in terms of the population. So has it been difficult, for example, to get older people to adapt to new technology? Do you have other significant sections of population who remain digitally disconnected and potentially excluded from these new ways of working? Stefania?
I don't have a percentage, but I will describe you shortly what is the situation in Bologna. We have this, the metropolitan city has two main situations. In the city center, everybody has a connection in terms of infrastructures, and so the city it's okay, and the same for the biggest center of the municipal area. But at the same time, we have some peripheral areas and internal areas that started to be in the mountain, so that part is not needs for infrastructure for sure. So that was there were this big problem that we didn't have everywhere the infrastructure needed to digital transformation. So this is the first point. But at the same time, I think that there is another problem that is more linked to the accessibility of technology and the accessibility of digital transformation. And in this sense, I say there are people that families that do not have digital devices at home, or maybe that have just one smartphone and one computer, and everybody has to work on the same and go to school on the same devices. So this is actually a problem of access of the digital tools. It's not just about infrastructures. And on the other hand, there is also an issue of skills. Elderly people do not have skill to access technology. So the idea, in my opinion, is that digital transformation strategies has to have more than an access. So you have to think about infrastructurization, but at the same time, you have to think about a very strategy for accessibility in this sense. So this is more or less the situation now that we have in Bologna.
Thank you. And what's the situation in Aarhus?
Sorry, what was exactly the question?
So roughly, kind of in terms of your population, what kind of percentage are digitally connected? Do you have sections of your population who haven't adapted to new technology, or where it's more difficult to get them to adapt? So you talked about medical appointments, for example, and it's worked very well with appointments with new mothers. But has the same thing worked for medical appointments with older people? Are they happy to see their doctor virtually rather than in person?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't have the overview. I don't have the answer really. I can just have some hypothesis, but I know that loneliness is a huge challenge. There's a lot of vulnerable people, a lot of people who is suffering of dementia and old people, and there have been a lot of loneliness. So I'm presenting the innovation, the positive side of the crisis, I think, and we haven't seen yet all the consequences of the crisis. We're just scratching in the surface right now.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. It's great talking about innovation, but the challenges that we're going to be facing coming out of this are unprecedented, and that actually leads us into our next question. And just a reminder to everyone, we've still got just under 10 minutes, so please don't be shy, stick your hand up or put your question in the chat. The question from Helen Teeling, which is two sides actually. One is about how are cities going to build the confidence both of businesses and perhaps especially citizens to get back to work and to get back to living, to post-lockdown living, and also what does our response need to be to youth unemployment. Anne, you talked about the impact, and all the evidence so far is showing us that young people are going to be particularly badly affected by the coming economic crisis, along with other groups like Black and minority ethnic people or women as well. But young people in this generation, aged around about 16 to 25, are probably going to be at the really sharp end of the economic crisis. So how can we plan for that? And for that, perhaps the question that that's facing all of us is about confidence. There's no point in opening things up if no one wants to return, if people are too frightened to return to living in society again. Stefania.
Thank you for the question. Actually, I'm not a city representative, so I will just give you a partial, partial vision of what's going on. Actually, I think that it is important now for a city just to give all the information that people need to understand the importance of some measures of safety, and so it is very important to communicate how to take the bus to go to work, how to leave the public space, how to leave the offices. So I think that sometimes there is no understanding of how the virus spread on some dynamics. So this is, I think, a very, there is a big space and it is very important to implement a good communication of this sanitary crisis, as it was for the virus that we experienced in the past. So it's very important to implement a good sanitary communication, I think. And on the one side, and on the other side, I don't know how to answer to the second question. For sure, in Italy we have a very big problem with youth unemployment, and I think that the rate of years is not just until 25 years, but in Italy we have a bigger problem, because there was 2 generations actually that experienced a very important economic crisis. So for sure, I do not know if I mean the municipality and the region are reasoning on a strategy to rise youth unemployment, but I think that this is maybe the most important challenge in this moment for the city. So I do not have a precise answer.
I'm not sure any of us have. Anne, do you have any thoughts on that particularly?
I don't know really. As in Denmark, we have the government is trying to give out a lot of those helping programs, financial support for the people, for the smaller startups, and for the industries that had really been under pressure economically at this crisis. And also there are a lot of initiatives right now for young people. It has nothing to do with unemployment, but with the situation that we are now heading the summer season, and we can't leave to Italy or to and so they try to make some attractive activities of being home in Denmark and being home in Aarhus. Yeah, there's no right answers to this, and again, I think communication and transparency is very important right now.
I think that's right. You both touched in your presentations on civic engagement and using the advance in the use of technology to engage communities. You talked about doing interviews, really wide-ranging interviews, Stefania. I certainly think that that's going to become even more important, that if our communities and citizens feel disengaged from the recovery, then the recovery isn't going to work for them, and it's going to be a particular challenge. So I think both of you highlighted both the opportunity and the necessity to try and use the systems that we've put in place to stay in touch with our residents and citizens, and listen to them and respond to them as much as possible. We've got a question from George Buchan. I think this will have to be our last question. Thank you very much, everyone who's posted questions. George says, I like the idea of design, adaptation and prototyping ideas and the engagement of the populace, just what we've been talking about. And this is a continuous process, particularly in the new reality of an unstable environment. So the final question is quite a big one, a big philosophical one. How can we obtain political will and flexibility in this economic and health crisis to try and prototype and acknowledge some ideas and plans may not work? And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Anne, about some of these things won't be taken into the future. So how do you, from your innovation centres, both of you who are deeply engaged in that, get that wider buy-in for that reality, that basic reality of some of these things aren't going to work out, but we need to try anyway, and some things might be discarded along the way. But if we don't experiment, then we're not going to find the things that work either. That's always, speaking as a politician, that's always a challenge for a politician. It's an area that I try to be in, but I recognise that it's a constant kind of challenge for me politically, and a very difficult thing to sell to the public sometimes. So how do you, as innovation leaders, communicate to the wider body politic, if you like, about how this needs to work?
Yeah, huge, big question here. But I think what comes into my mind is that in Aarhus we are right now having a political process about our new climate strategy for the next 3-4 years, and a very central part of that strategy is really how to engage people in making new effort or making new what do you call it, to change habits, and we really have to succeed with that challenge. So we are very occupied of it, both at a political level, but also for us as innovation leaders, and the citizens also really would like to join. We just have to find some structures and a way to really, a platform to do this in. Yeah.
Stefania, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, it's one of the roles of the European Innovation Foundation it's also to prototype these engagement processes, and the municipality of Bologna actually had the willingness to have a body that is in charge to think about engagement and is in charge to manage engagement of people. So there was a political stake on that. So we have a city that is very sensitive to these issues. But in my slide, if you have seen, I put the word advocacy. And actually now we have to understand that we have to build alliances, because we are living a very important moment for the future of our societies. And we have to understand that we need some political courage to take some decision. And if not, we will not exit the crisis. That is kind of relevant. So we have to think about the importance of big alliances, social alliances between policy, public administration, politics, and citizens. That is crucial, I think, because we have to go out from this crisis altogether. If not, we are not surviving to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's our time up, everyone. But I think this has been really fascinating, and I think some quite inspiring presentations and responses there from both Stefania and Anne. You've really given us a broad overview of what innovation really means, and how innovation comes to the fore and really shows its worth in a crisis, but also gives us a way forward for the future. And for me, I think what's come through very strongly from both of your presentations and your answers is how innovation, how much it needs to range across everything that we do and have impact and outcomes, both in terms of the civic realm, the economy, urban design, communities, that connection with communities and with citizens and populations, and also about the life circumstances of citizens, and particularly vulnerable citizens, the role that innovation has to play in helping us to transform in all of those areas of life. That this crisis that we're in, which is presenting us enormous challenges on a scale that in some ways are still difficult to imagine, is also presenting us with opportunities. And we really have to grasp this moment for those opportunities as well, but do it in a realistic way, and be prepared to experiment, and understand that experiments don't always work. So I think it was extremely informative. Thank you very much, both of you. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I've got no doubt there'll be many more of these conversations still to come, whether on iKEN and elsewhere. So just, if you haven't done so already, all it remains for me to say is please do head to iken.global and sign up, and also get involved in VentureFest. The details are all in the chat, at the beginning of the chat. As I said, we've recorded this session and we will make it available online after the event, so please share it with colleagues. And if you've got any other questions or queries, please don't hesitate to contact my colleagues at the Glasgow City of Science Innovation, and they'll be in touch with you with all the details. So with that, it just remains for me to thank once again our speakers. I'd ask you to join me in doing so as well, and to thank everyone who's joined us here today. And it's been a really great discussion. Thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.